An entitled mom steals my iPad and demands I let her keep it. I work at a car dealership as a receptionist, one of my duties being greeting customers when they enter. I am a professional artist on the side, and I've been busy with some commissions lately since it's not busy at the dealer. I started working on my iPad mini. It's old and I'm working on upgrading, but I currently can't afford to. So I live with it despite the battery life being really short, and I have to basically keep it plugged in at all times. During my lunch, I was in the waiting area doing more work when a little kid, a girl no older than 4, came up and watched me work. This happens a lot when I draw in public, and usually the kids just ask a lot of questions. But this nice girl was very quiet and just had a look of amazement, so I just let her be. Her mother, the entitled mother in the story, was nearby at a salesman's desk working on purchasing a new car, which is a long and no doubt boring process. The salesman, working with her, walked away, which at my dealership they do very often to retrieve paperwork, talk to the sales manager, etc. She looks over at me and her kid and asks, "What are you looking at?" Her kid points at my screen and says, "She's painting puppies." I was working on Twitch emotes of a streamer's dog. I sort of show my screen to entitled mother, and she then asks her kid if she wants to draw, which the girl excitedly says yes. I expected entitled mother to pull out a paper and pencils, or at least ask if I can get some for her too, but she just looked at me expectantly. When I realized she was waiting for me to hand her my iPad, I said, "Oh, she can't use mine, but I can get her a notepad and pens," but apparently that wasn't good enough. She sighs and says, "Just let her draw a little bit. I'm almost done here anyway," which I knew for a fact wasn't true. They were waiting on bank approval for a loan, which can take anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes, and even then they'll be here longer for finance paperwork, detailing, etc. I start to explain that this is part of my work and she scoffs, saying I'm just doodling puppies and it was selfish that I wouldn't let her daughter doodle on my device too. The poor girl was just looking at her hands, looking quite embarrassed. I then pretended my lunch was over and got up to spend the rest of my lunch at my desk. I couldn't see her behind a huge truck on display, but I can hear her grumble to her daughter about who knows what. Whatever. Pretend like I didn't hear so I don't mess up this sale for my coworker. Sometime later, nature called me and I got up to use the restroom. I left my iPad on my seat so it'll stay plugged in and put a notepad over it to try to cover it up somehow. My desk is a wide crescent shape with no drawers to keep my things safe, so this was the best thing I could do to somewhat hide it. I was in the restroom no longer than 3 minutes, but when I got back, only my charger remained. My iPad and Apple Pencil were gone. I looked over to the lady who had her large purse suspiciously in her lap now instead of on the floor beside her chair like it was before. I was panicked because a lot of my work is on that iPad that I needed. I went to my sales manager and told him the situation. He told me he would take care of it, but to be patient for now. I went back to my desk full of anxiety and my stomach doing backflips. My manager went to the desk where entitled mother was to work out the deal. They're far enough that I can hear their voices, but not pinpoint what they're saying. But I did hear her eventually yell, "How dare you? I would never steal. Do you want to lose this sale?" I immediately got up and went over behind the lady so the sales manager could see me, but she couldn't. He tells her he understands, but my iPad went missing and he wants to make sure no one currently in the building has it. That's when I remembered the Find My feature on all Apple products. My iPad was connected to the dealer's Wi-Fi, so I pulled out my phone and pressed play sound for my iPad. Her purse started dinging. She tried to play it off as if it's her ringtone as the sales manager stared at her as if daring her to answer it. Thing is, with the play sound feature, if I keep pressing it, it will keep pinging. I made my presence known and told her to give my iPad back. That's when she stopped playing dumb and just said, "Just let my daughter have it. Her birthday is coming up, and I can't afford a present for her since I'm getting this car." Sales manager said he was happy to cancel the deal so she can instead buy a birthday present for her child and to return my iPad or he'll call the police. She practically threw my iPad at me where it hit me in the gut and took her daughter from the waiting area to leave. Poor thing looked at me with the most apologetic look on her face before leaving with her mother. My manager might have helped me, but he's not exactly the nicest person. From now on, I'm not allowed to bring my iPad to the dealer. I have to either leave it in my car or leave it at home. Whatever. Entitled mother took my Apple Pencil with her since she left in a hurry, so I'm gonna stop by the Apple store after work to get a new one, but until then, I'm stuck with my pens and a notepad. I can't believe someone would steal from me like that in such an obvious way. I really do feel for the little girl. She must have felt so embarrassed and must have had it rough having a mother like that. If she needs a gift for her daughter, she should definitely prioritize that over getting a new car. It's really unfair that you came out of this being punished by no longer being allowed to bring your iPad with you to work. That really sucks. My entitled mother stole my heart meds to blackmail me. So this incident actually happens quite a few years ago, and I feel like I'm finally at a point where I can post about it. I'm hoping sharing it, hearing what you guys have to say about what happened, will bring me some measure of closure and catharsis. For some background, I am disabled. I was born with severe EDS, a genetic disorder that, among many other symptoms, affecting pretty much every bodily system, causes my joints to dislocate and sublux, partially dislocate, with very little prompting. I once dislocated my shoulder by flumping down onto my bed from a sitting position too roughly. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 17 because EDS wasn't well recognized by most doctors back in the early 2000s. Having abused me in every possible sense for my entire childhood already, my extremely narcissistic, alcoholic mother, the entitled parent in this story, immediately saw my diagnosis as a whole new set of ways she could hurt me. She would forcibly dislocate my joints as punishment for entirely imagined offenses, telling me no one would believe me if I told them she'd done it, and she'd tell them I was just a clumsy little lying skank, which she'd already been branding me as for as long as I could remember. Her entitlement was and is deeply rooted in every aspect of her personality. She would often stand over me looming, "As far as you're concerned, I am God. Everything under this roof is mine, my property, and that includes you and everything in your room. You don't breathe without my say-so. You bought it? Don't care. It's mine, and there isn't a bloody thing you can do about it because I am God." And she did that sober too. Yep, so entitled she was basically delusional. My father was and remains such a pathetic excuse for a parent that I genuinely almost forgot to mention him here. He was constantly enabling her abuse, convincing us it was our fault that she was abusing us, and actively prevented my younger sister and me from getting help. When I was 24, I was finally able to move out of my parents' house. My sister had moved out a year or two earlier with the help and support of friends. I moved in with my best friend, but was still very much under my parents' control psychologically. My mother would help me by picking up a particular heart medication for me from a hospital that was about 90 minutes away by bus since I couldn't drive. She always made a massive fuss about it and what a huge favor she was doing for me, guilting me as much as she possibly could. At this point, I was so beaten down and small that I would apologize for everything, like literally preface pretty much everything I said with, "Hi, I'm sorry, but," and end pretty much everything with, "Sorry again." I was a mess, and nearly a decade after escaping that hellhole, I'm honestly still rebuilding my sense of self. On the day of the incident, that's the focus of this story, we'd arranged for my entitled mother to pick up my meds and meet me at my local shopping mall where I'd been getting a few grocery items to give me the meds and drive me home. One of her favorite things to do was always to make people wait for her, presumably because it gives her a sense of power over others. So I knew to expect her to be late. She'd already yelled at me over the phone that I had to be outside, standing at the curb in the car park when she pulled up, or she'd just keep driving, which wasn't a bluff because she'd done that before, just because I'd been sitting on a bench a few feet back when she arrived. God forbid anyone kept her waiting. So 10 minutes before the agreed upon time, I was standing at the curb, groceries bagged up and ready to go. As our meetup time passed, I had to sit on the ground and it started raining. I should add here that being out in the cold and rain sends my chronic pain through the roof and can leave me unable to use my hands for days. So I was already annoyed at the situation, but I was also terrified of this monster of a woman. When she was 20 minutes late, I sent her a text, which took me a while because hands, asking how far off she was. I got a nasty reply saying she was on her way and I'd better be standing by the curb when she got there. I replied that I was sitting on the footpath in the rain, so to please not take too long. No reply. At 35 minutes late, I texted her again saying I was cold, soaking wet, and in a ton of pain, and asking where the hell she was and what was taking so long. It was very unusual for me to be so direct with her, but being out of the house and with people who were working to build me back up had given me a new boldness, and I was in so much pain. I gave far less of a damn about the consequences than usual. I was trembling with anxiety as I sent it, but it still felt empowering. She called and screamed at me down the phone about how ungrateful I was, how she was going so far out of her way to do this massive favor for me, and that I'd be lucky if she showed up at all after I'd spoken to her like that. I pointed out that the favor is somewhat negated if you cause the person harm by screwing them around in the process, and she screamed some more abuse at me, told me I'd be better standing at the curb when she got there, that she was going to beat the living daylights out of me, and hung up. We had 2 more rounds of this until she was over an hour late, and finally I was done. Something in me snapped, and I just said screw it. After getting on the bus safely with my waterlogged shopping bags, I used speech to text to send her a final text saying that I was done playing her ridiculous games and was taking the bus home. I told her it was completely unacceptable to demand that her disabled, severely chronically ill daughter stay out in the freezing rain for well over an hour and that Dad would get my meds from her and drop them off at my apartment. I'd already asked him and let him know what the situation was. I was a blubbering mess, in delirious agony and anxiety when I got home and my flatmate had to take the next day off work to look after me. He'd agreed to act as my carer to help me escape my parents, and his work was extremely good about it. In the aftermath, my entitled mother refused to give my dad the medication for me, saying that if I wanted it, I would have to come back begging for her forgiveness for being such an ungrateful little shit. She had this whole rant about it, of course, going on about what an awful, nasty little girl I was, etc. Even added in some ableist stuff about how they should have killed me at birth and saved themselves 2 decades of medical bills because I didn't deserve everything they'd done and sacrificed for me. She literally demanded that I show up in person, get down on my knees, and grovel. She thought she had total power over me by holding a crucial medication hostage. She said a bunch of stuff about how I'd better comply with her demands before being without my medicine made me too sick to be able to get on my knees, or tough shit, I wasn't getting them back at all. The most bizarre part was that she genuinely seemed to believe that I'd wronged her, and she was entitled not only to an apology from me for standing up for myself, I guess, but to withhold my meds from me in order to force one out of me, because she said she knew I'd never get her what she was owed otherwise. I went to the police station to try to get them to retrieve the obviously stolen meds, but was told that because I'd given the pharmacy authorization to allow her to collect and sign for the medication, it was legally hers to keep, and there was nothing they could do. Note, I live in Australia. I called the pharmacy and explained the whole situation to the extremely kind pharmacist who was able to organize a new prescription with my specialist through the hospital, and I had a friend who worked nearby pick it up for me. In the meantime, my dad broke 24 years of consistent spinelessness and lied to my entitled mother to scare her into handing over the original stolen meds, saying that I'd gone to the police, that he'd convinced me to hold off so he could give her a chance to just hand them over without police involvement. It worked, and I ended up stocked up for an extra month, but the whole incident resulted in me finally cutting all contact with my entitled mother. When he dropped off the meds, my dad tried to convince me to make peace with my entitled mother for his sake, and said that by refusing to speak with her, I was being selfish because I must know how hard it would make things for him since he had to live with her. Still riding high on that wave of boldness, I told him he was being selfish by expecting me to continue to put up with her abuse, as he always did anytime I tried to stand up for myself with him. He got super nasty and vindictive, said some extremely hurtful, deeply personal things, and left. As of a few years ago, I've now cut contact with him as well. I'm completely free of both of them and have a great relationship with my sister now that we're both adults and have a clear perspective on how our parents parentified me and pitted us against one another as kids. I have genuinely awesome people around me these days and still live with that same flatmate. My dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness a little while back and doesn't have much time left, though I'm still not sure how I feel about that. He finally left my entitled mother, who, after relying on him to manage her chaotic mess of a life for decades, is utterly failing to fend for herself. She's well on her way towards ending up cold and alone, which is cathartic for me to know, to be honest. Pathologically entitled, abusive people just deserve to have the people they abuse leave them. It's that simple. I can't believe you went through all that. You're an inspiration for being able to leave your abusive parents and get on with your life. It's a shame to hear about your dad's illness, but it sounds like you're doing much better after all this suffering, so I'm really happy for you. It's good that you have such a supportive friend in your flatmate. It truly makes me angry that some people have children with the intent to abuse them and that nobody steps in to help. There should have been family, teachers, friends, etc. who could have spoken up for you and helped you, but you were let down by everyone. I respect you for getting through it all alone until now, finally surrounding yourself with people who really care about you. Stepmom steals my dad away from me. I'm a 17-year-old male, and this story takes place a few years ago. My dad got a new girlfriend in September of 2019. We thought this was great and everyone was happy because he was pretty lonely. When we met her, she was great. She was funny, liked messing around, and was just a nice person. On Thanksgiving of that year is when the first odd thing happened. She talked about how she just left her husband because she didn't like him anymore. She fully left the state and didn't even divorce till she was forced to. On Christmas, we were all playing around with our presents, as kids do, and she all of a sudden starts yelling at her kids for playing with our stuff, which was permitted to use, and started pulling them by the ear. This caught everyone off guard, and my mom told my dad that he might want to be careful with her. Then February came around, and it was a normal weekend. Me, being the annoying big brother I am, decides to steal a Skittle from my sister. I know this was a pretty rude thing to do, but I was joking around and gave it right back. She then starts yelling at me for how rude it was and how I should be nicer to her. This threw me way off guard. She started yelling because I took a Skittle. She then sent me to the corner with one leg and a count to 100. This is extremely odd because no one in our entire family gives physical punishments. Meanwhile, my dad is just standing there and my sister is trying to explain that it was fine. Later that night, I threw up, and for a very, very long time, I thought I was just sick. Turns out that it was a reaction to a trauma I had when I was a baby, where my biological parents starved me and my brothers and got us in trouble for eating. That's a story for another time. When I was being told about this, I also learned that since I was adopted, my parents agreed that I would never receive punishment for food ever. This is why I threw up. My brain remembered the trauma and reacted to it. What made me mad is that my dad just stood there when he knew about this deal. After that event, we weren't told this at the time, but we didn't see them for a very long time. The story above was part of why. In August of 2021, we started to receive counseling, and in September, we started seeing our dad again. He promised he had changed and that entitled mother was to not give punishment to me or my sister in any way. We started rebuilding our relationship, and for a month it was good. Then 2 days before Halloween, my brother gets sent to a psychological hospital for allegedly destroying the house in bad behavior. This was hard on us, but he had been aggressive in the past, so it wasn't the hardest to believe. He got out on December 10th and was once again admitted on January 3rd. This was because he had gotten very aggressive and angry when he found out that he didn't get a PS5 for Christmas. Not a single person believed this. During this period, his dog was taken and put down, and he had been locked in his room for 2 weeks, only allowed to leave for the bathroom. They then had student-parent meetings. In this meeting, entitled mother, the girlfriend, verbally admitted that they locked him in his room. This immediately started a CPS investigation. During this time, he was once again admitted to the hospital. This time it was because, and I quote, punching her kids, threatening to kill everyone in the family, hit her, and attacked the neighbor's dog. By this point, everyone knew she was crazy and tried talking to my dad about it. His parents, his brother, his sister, us kids, my mom. I mean, everyone told him that he was being manipulated and she was crazy. He didn't believe any of it. While my brother was in the hospital, he told the doctors about everything that he'd been through. When he was released, he said that he'd rather be in the hospital than go home with entitled mother and my dad. This is when he started hitting the car and yelling at entitled mother. She would grab her boys by the ears and make them throw away their stuff if they got in trouble. My sister and mom were told every weekend that she needed better clothes and that my mom was mentally abusing us. Weirdly, I was treated amazingly and nice, and I was never talked about badly. We were also gaslit all the time. When they went to the court for the investigation, she claimed that I threw the plate at my sister, and then every other accusation I've said. In April, my dad ripped up and burned my brother's adoption paper. My mom had a copy and told him he wasn't allowed in the house anymore. He stayed at our house for a little, and then we had a court hearing that gave the right of my brother to live with my aunt. He got counseling and we started seeing each other again. My dad was told by the state and the trauma therapist that he was not allowed any of our information or to see us ever unless he agreed to get counseling, have entitled mother out of his life, and if we agree. She got rid of my older sister, then worked on getting rid of my brother, starting with his dog. She then moved on to my sister, and then she got caught, and they now live in Minnesota. My dad still believes that she's a good person and that we were in the wrong. I know I should dislike both my dad and entitled mother, but I can't get myself to hate my dad. He meant way too much to our lives. I know it's a lot to take in, and I wish there was something I could say to make you feel better, but really, just reading your story makes me feel like a terrible person. It's such a shame that entitled mother has caused you so much pain and heartache throughout your life. And your dad? Wow, you've gone through so much with him, and he doesn't even seem to care about any of it. I can't believe he was willing to lose you guys over his manipulative cow of a girlfriend. At least now you're living with your aunt and don't have to deal with either of them anymore. I hope that one day you'll be able to sort things out with your dad. Father calls me abusive for getting medical treatment. My parents' favorite thing to do is to accuse me of being a manipulative liar, which is funny because I'm genuinely the world's worst liar. I'm too dumb to be good at it. And I instantly get nervous and start stuttering just because of the sheer stress. I've always been more comfortable being honest, even when it's gotten me into trouble. It gets me in trouble a lot with my parents because they really don't like to be told what they don't want to hear. Those of you who may have read the first post I made on this sub might remember my parents are, let's say, wary of modern medicine. They don't like mental health professionals of any kind. They are selectively anti-vaxxers. Some they're okay with, some they're convinced will turn you inside out depending on what articles reach them on Facebook. And they don't believe in certain kinds of treatments or procedures for various ideological reasons that are all very silly. Just to paint a picture, my mother has given me healing crystals more than once over various ailments I've went through. They are lucky my brother and I never got gravely ill as children. I was having a perfectly normal conversation with my mother on the phone yesterday when I accidentally let slip I had a consultation booked a week from now with a doctor. I hadn't mentioned it to my parents at all because it's one of those medical procedures they do not approve of. I still hadn't come up with a good lie as to why I was going back into surgery in a few months or so, or how I could explain it away. My mother, already ready to go off upon hearing this, asked me what for. I rolled a 1 on persuasion. I just couldn't come up with anything that'd satisfy them on the spot. My mother is going off on me for lying. My father starts yelling in the background too. They start making threats to get me off of the family's insurance plan for wasting resources, which would suck because my meds are $350 a month. I just started a new job and my benefits won't kick in for another 2 months. I get off the phone with them. At lunch, I decide I'm just going to rip the bandage off then and there. I tell them over text the truth, that I knew they'd react badly, and that if they're going to really take me off the insurance plan, to let me know as soon as possible so I can hop on Blue Cross. They call me a few hours later. My mom goes off telling me that it's your choice, but you're hurting me by doing it and hurting me for lying about it. She's crying. I honestly wanted to just start laughing. My dad disagrees. He informs me that he feels that this is a family matter, that he wants me to come down to their house so it can be discussed in person. My body, my health, a family matter. For context, I don't have a car. Their house is in another city, in an area where if no one drives me, I'm trapped there. I tell them no, that I only told them so there's no confusion why I'm going back in for surgery, and this is the last time it's going to be brought up. That I refuse to talk about it further, and I'm not stranding myself with only them to get cornered about it. That's the point in which my father drops the zinger. With all this lying and manipulating and you trying to tear the family apart like this, I feel like I'm being abused. Stunning. I got off the phone with them and have their contacts blocked for right now so I can focus on my job, which is the best job I've ever had, best paying, good benefits, and good work. I'm putting this in here as a reprieve. They'll get over it. I'll start my application at Blue Cross just in case. It'll be cheaper than paying in full for my meds. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I can't even imagine what you were going through to not have your parents support you through something so serious. It's great to hear you have a good job now, and you won't be needing to rely on anything from them. However, I do believe you should be open to giving your parents another chance if they come round to their senses and try to make contact with you. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now. Otherwise, you're definitely the jerk.